Hi and welcome. So this time around we picked up a new tool from Harbor Freight. If this is any hint, a bunch of glass beads. That might give a suggestion. I've been looking for a sandblasting cabinet for a while. Main thing to hold me back is I don't really have a place to put it. On top of that, it takes a fair amount of airflow, and I don't even have a particularly large tank. I have a 5 horsepower air compressor, but it's a 20-gallon tank. And I don't know if it's really a 5 horsepower because it's only like 14 cubic feet a minute at 90 psi. Max pressure 125 psi. So this might be a bit much for it, but I've decided this thing's going to live on the side of the house outside, so I'm going to have to make a cover for it to keep it out of the elements, but it probably won't last very long. It's not terribly expensive. I am kind of curious about the build quality. I do not have particularly high hopes, but let's just assemble this guy and we'll take the journey together. Just for starters, you can see the cardboard quality in these guys. Now, I've had other Harbor Freight boxes end up pretty rough when they get to my house, and they end up being fine inside because they put enough packing material. I'll be curious to see about this one because this one looks a little bit worse for wear. There's holes all over the place. You look over here. Anyways, let's pop this open. Pop the cover off, and this is what's inside. And they always seem to put foam between parts, so I mean, it doesn't even look like the paint got damaged particularly. And yeah, in general, it looks like it's a pretty healthy state. Oh, there's a bend though. Wow, that got crushed. Holy cow. Yeah, that's nice. And that side as well. I don't know how well that shows up on camera, but I think that's all supposed to be flat. Another set of pieces inside, crushed and bent, as well as down here. It's very lovely. And this piece is mostly good. Rather than take this back and just do it all over again, I'm going to see if I can salvage this, unbend these pieces. They don't look like they're impossible straight, and this is pretty light gauge steel, which is a negative as much as it is a positive in this particular example. Here's all the parts. The glass survived okay. That was pretty well protected. I would say at least 80% of the parts were damaged in some way or another. So there's the legs and all the other sheet metal pieces over here. Very light gauge sheet metal. You can see how thin this is. Very, very thin. Although it doesn't need to be particularly structurally well built because it's just a container to keep the dust in, essentially. So I'm counting on that fact, but I'm kind of disappointed. Look at that. Even where they welded there, it tore. It got hit hard enough. So anyways, let's assemble this guy. The instruction assembly manual seems like it's okay. First many pages are all warnings and hazards and typical lawyer speak. The parts are all numbered here on the sheet, but they made it open from the rear where you wouldn't be able to see what the part numbers are. So a bug box would be a better idea. I just cut the plastic, but it leaves these really sharp edges, so I gotta be careful when I'm reaching in here. Very unfortunate. So we're just going to start by putting the light on first, which is an odd choice if you ask me, but we'll do that. Step, put the badly bent light clamps in, although they're different than the drawing shows, which doesn't show, it just shows spring clips. These guys obviously have a bolt to hold things in, but they don't show that in the instructions. So presumably, like maybe these two long ones here, don't know. We'll have to guess and see what's left over when we get to done, when we're done. So we'll move on to the gloves next. Lots and lots of screws for the glove holders. They did have gaskets on the front, which is a nice touch to keep the dust from leaking out, because dust is your enemy, because it's really bad for you to breathe. Looks like they hold the gloves on just with a clip, which is kind of, I guess it'll work. These screws are all long, so if you're ever changing that out, you got to be careful not to cut yourself. So let's attach the gloves next. So I assumed that their label was up since the instructions don't tell you how to mount the gloves, and I set them up so my left and right hands with the thumbs would be on the ups, up when they're attached. The gloves went on pretty nicely, and when I was at Harbor Freight, I did notice they had some replacement gloves. I assume these aren't going to last all that long, but I guess time will tell on that one. It's just rubberized cloth. The ends are much heavier than this part, so maybe they'll last all right. I've got hopes. Next, attaching a dust port on one side of the cabinet, and the instructions are kind of murky. They say, careful, don't use a certain one of these flanges, but I don't know if it's right or not because they're not numbered or labeled. So the shape seems right, so I'm going to guess it's right. It seems like a really unfortunate way to do things, but that's what we're doing because that's all we've got. Step 3, dust port is on here, and I think this is a cap for it, but I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it goes on the inside. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. It's the same exact size, and it does fit here. That's how they delivered it. I don't know if that's to keep dust from flying out when you're not using the dust port. It's kind of a weird cap. Part 3 done. No gasket around this one. It does lie reasonably flat, so hopefully not too much dust will get out. Crazy next step is basically assemble all of the pieces, almost, other than just the base. It's kind of crazy. So they're recommending using the foam tape they provided. This stuff is probably adequate in the near term, but it's not very good. It's kind of crappy. I'm going to try and use this VHB tape I ordered. This 3M very high bond strength tape, and it'll help prevent me from having to puncture holes through this tape because it's 1/4 inch, so I can just run along the edge and it'll still provide a decent seal, I hope. It's incredibly sticky stuff, so it'll hold this thing together nicely as well. The only potential downside is once you put this stuff together, it doesn't want to come off very easily. So I guess I should be careful. This foam tape, the adhesive on that is nothing. So I'm sort of on the fence about that. Top piece on, I recommend setting this thing on its side. That way the angle that the top is at won't make it so hard because it's trying to hang there. The VHB tape helped because it helped bond these two sides together while I tried to reach in. Because look, they put a bolt way back here where it's almost impossible to get to. That was fun. So yeah, we got just the top on. Now we're gonna put the front on, and then the sides go over the front. So we'll give that a shot next. I'm sure hoping I got this the right side up because there's a little bit of a dent, and the drawing sort of makes it look like the dent goes up towards the top, but I'm not 100% certain. By the way, this VHB tape, it comes off pretty easily initially. You can just sort of peel it right off, just no issue. But don't let that fool you because long term, this stuff is incredibly tacky. So make sure you got it right, which in this case, I sure am hoping, because the drawing makes it look like the flange is up there. If you can see that, I don't know if you can. Looks like the flange side's up, so I put the little bend here up. And if that's wrong, I'm going to have words. Next on goes the left side piece, and that had foam tape already on it. They already applied that at the factory. It's single-sided, not double sticky, so I'm just screwing it on. Of course, the side that's damaged the most is the most important because it's the side with the door. So you got a cracked weld there, and I tried straightening these bend parts in the vise, just clamp the vise jaws straight across this and straighten it out a little bit. Took some of the bumps out of it, but it's really badly screwed up, so I'm not entirely sure it's going to work. Next up is mounting the light and the switch assembly that goes on the outside. Goes over here, and they do have a gland for the wires to go through. That's a nice touch. I'm still not sure which bolts hold the light piece there. The light clamps, I guess we'll find out shortly. I don't know if they're in the instructions. Yeah, so I'm going to wait towards the end before I put that on because I really have no idea if those long bolts are for this or for something else, and I hate to put them here and then have to come back and get them. So we're just going to let the light sit there for now. So holding the light clamps in, there is a gland on one side and a wire on the other side, and you can loosen this to get some space on the wire. Since I'm seeing light through there, that's not great because that means there's going to be a bunch of dirt ending up in the switch box. But for now, I guess that's what's going to have to be. So I've got the wires out here, tightened the nut down, and we'll put the switch box on next, which is right here. No instructions on the wiring, and this is an LED, so it's going to need to have the polarity right. So I'm just guessing light color with light color on the switch, so brown on one side, blue on the other side. That's typically how switches go, but it might be wrong. So the unit comes with a DC to DC supply. There's the switch. There's the light. It's nicely diffused. It's reasonably bright. It looks like an LED light. This is a DC power supply, 5 volts. Seems not terrible. Next up is to assemble the triangular parts, the funnel. And like everything else on this, tons of them are bent. So that's really exciting. I think this one goes this way. They don't give, again, very good instructions, so you're going to have to play it by ear. But looking at the flange down here, I believe that goes that way. That includes the draining funnel for the media with the gate for that, which is not a particularly good design. That foam is going to break down in a couple of years, and then it's going to start leaking. Not impressed with that at all. Well, that was the locking mechanism. I mean, normally it'd be flipped the other way so gravity would be on its side, but still not impressed. Next on is putting all 4 legs. And because of this gap here, they provided shims, which is nice, except they only provided 3, and there's 4 places where you might need shims. I'm thinking maybe, oh, I see. Yeah, this back rear one here does not need it. Okay, I guess we're all right then. Yeah, down here. That's where the door attaches, so it doesn't need it. A couple steps back, this sizable blow up, which here's my finger so you can tell how big that drawing is. Basically shows you to put everything in together. And of course, I missed one little spot. I missed the hinges and and then in the door, which I have put on since and just held closed with a piece of tape. Then on the door, I found this piece, which is not in the blow-up drawing, and this piece has to be screwed on the door, presumably with those, I'm guessing. They don't really discuss it. This is what the latch attaches onto. I can do that later. So the next step is going to be a bit challenging after you do the legs here. They want you to put the bottom on. They show you putting it bottom up, but it's pretty heavy. So I've got it leaned against the washer dryer, mostly because that's the free space in my shop where there's a carpet down so it doesn't damage things too badly. I think at this angle it might actually work out better than if it was straight up and down, and you're trying to lift it up into place because you've got to juggle a bunch of parts together. So you have the bottom piece that we finished, the funnel, and then you have this piece which has to sit on top of it. Then this piece, which has to sit on top of that while you set it in place. It has to be inside because you may not be able to fit it after. I'll check and see that. If I can fit it after, I may leave it out. So it's a bit of a juggling match, this next part. And then you can put the shelf on. Then they've got this ring that I don't see in the drawing at all. And it looks like it's the same layout as this. So I guess it's supposed to like act as a washer. So maybe it's supposed to go inside here. I don't exactly know. Or maybe you put a ring of foam tape and then use this as a spacer between it just to even up this really uneven surface here. I can't see what use it would be as a washer. The holes are the same size, so it's not like it's going to help the screws in any way, shape, or form. So I'm thinking I'm going to put some of their cheesy but thick foam tape all the way around this to level it out to make a good seal, and then put this little gasket in between, which will then mate up with this gasket they put on here rather sloppily. And maybe that'll work. So I've put some of the foam tape that came with it. It's really crappy. The adhesive's good, but the foam tape itself is pretty crappy all the way around. Then I put this gasket, and then I'm going to try and mash that whole assembly on top of it at this angle here, because I think that'll be easier to let gravity hold it in place while I try and get a couple screws and reach in to tighten them, because that's going to be problematic. The screen does fit through the door over there, so I'm going to put it on last after I'm done. I was lined this up. The edges need to come in a bit, which is a little unfortunate because that means I might have to loosen all the bolts to try and suck this together. Most of the screw holes line up. So next up, we're going to set this guy on top, and I'm trying to be careful to keep that locking mechanism facing forward, which would be where the hand side is, just to make it easier to get to. One other suggestion is to get a bunch of pointy bits to help align all of these holes and hold them in place. Also to poke through the foam. It's not that the screws can't easily push through the foam, they can. The problem is that the screws, the foam, the adhesive's great, the foam is crap. And the adhesive sticks to everything you poke through it, and it makes a huge mess. You don't want that on the threads of these screws. They're all metric, so they're very fine pitch. I got all of them in place except for the far corner. And you know, maybe that flange was supposed to go on the outside of this instead, so that it would seal up those gaps. I don't know, maybe that's the case. I'm going to use foam tape. I might have gotten the order reversed. You can't really tell from the drawing, unfortunately. It looks like on the drawing, actually, that the little separate piece is in between, like I put it. But it seems like it might make more sense to put it on the bottom here, so you could seal up these gaps here that media can come out of. I was able to reach all but one of the screws, which is in a far corner. But I'm going to jump to the next step, which is to put on the bottom tray first. Because it's much easier while it's upside down, because it just sits between the legs here, like so. You can see it's bent too, because everything's bent. So I got to straighten that guy out and then screw this guy in place. It'll help stabilize the legs. Bottom shelf secured. By the way, for anyone who's wondering, I'm about 4 hours into assembling this so far. In the hardware kit, I was shorted one screw and one nut of the M6 size. I've been very careful to keep them sorted the whole time. I'm just going to assume these long ones are the bracket to hold the light in place. And I think I'm only going to need one of them because they're very hard to get to. So maybe I'll put them on, just lightly snug them. I'm not quite sure, but I think these are for the light. I can't see anything else. Not that the manual would probably let me know, even if it knew, because it likes to keep secrets. So next I have to put the air hose and all of the hose assembly in, but first I got to re-loosen this and realign this door, because I just put it in place roughly while it was upside down. So now that I can see, I'm going to line it up. And I'm also going to screw that plate on the end here that the latch attaches to, that they didn't discuss at all, and put the latch on, which I didn't see in the instructions either, but the latch goes right here pretty obviously. So let's see if we can get that all fixed up. So the door is square with the back. I used those 3 sheet metal screws to hold this in plastic. Never a comforting feeling. The whole mechanism lines up, but the door is a slightly different angle than the pitch of the top. Maybe it was from a different kit. I mean, it works, it seals, because it seals over like an inch area, but that's a little disappointing. Yeah, they got the same crappy foam tape in here. Oh, actually, yeah, this is the same crappy foam tape. I don't predict it's going to last very long. Oh, it looks like they had the option for a light on the door at one time or something. To be honest, I'm a little confused about why you would just do through very thin hollow plastic. That's what's holding it in. I mean, granted, when this pulls, it's going to try and pull it sort of sideways so the screws are strong, but that doesn't seem like a great long-term solution. I suspect I'll end up with through-hole screws or something like that at some point. Don't know, actually, because I might have to make a plate go out further. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Anyways, alrighty, let's see if we can bolt the light in. See, now the screws, I couldn't get them in. One thing would be to take off the mounts for the lights and then screw it on, but no, you can't do that, because then you wouldn't be able to get the screws for the back end. That's quite a dilemma. So I guess the nuts have to go up top. I got the 2 bolts for the clamps for the lights in, and they're actually pushing against the ceiling, so they're too long for this. But they don't have any other bolts to use, so I'm using these, but they're probably not right. They should be shorter by a fair amount. It did make it easier to get the clamp together, which was spread a little bit, but anyways. So now I'm looking at the hose assembly, and they used very, very unflexible hose. The pickup for this guy is this metal rod that goes down. I'm just assuming you put it somewhere where it can pick up material fairly easily, so I'm just sticking it through. And the other end of this guy goes out through the side over here, and I need to put a proper compressor fitting on that. The gun itself, I haven't put the glass on here yet, because that's going to make everything difficult once I do that, so I figured I'd wait till the end to do that. Looks like it's okay. The valve seems fine. It's cast aluminum. Nothing to write home about, but I don't think it's too bad. I don't have much experience with this. We have these at work, a much nicer one than this, but it all just seemed to work. I guess more experience will let me be more particular about analysis about this. Let's just see how long it lasts too. They give you some extra ceramic nozzles there, which I guess wear out. 3 of them, so that's kind of cool. And these remaining screws are for hold the glass, which is over here, which they have supposedly protective film with. So we'll get that on in a minute, but let me get the hose fitting and see if they provided a compressor hose fitting or whether I need to provide one. I'm guessing I need to provide one. And it looks like you may unscrew this piece to bolt on here to stick out rather than have the compressor fitting go through. I wasn't actually sure which way they wanted to do it because they've got these 2 big washers, so that kind of suggests that one would go on each side of this flange here to help support it. That is going to make the compressor fitting stick way out on this though. A little curious about that. The instructions do not say much about it. Yeah, they really don't. It's funny, the instructions show much, much longer hoses. That hose would never reach several feet outside this thing. Yeah, that's pretty bizarre. All right, so we're going to hook up suction hose and I'll bring you right back. They didn't provide the compressor fitting, but they did provide a very generous amount of Teflon tape based on how squeezy this is. It seems like they filled this up. That's kind of surprising. So anyways, all we need is a tiny amount. Then I have this other curious tape here, which I'm guessing might be for the glass. I don't know. We'll get to that in a minute. That's the last step, putting the glass on. I know it would have been a lot more work for them, but I would have been a much bigger fan if this whole assembly had been recessed inside and you just barely had this exposed at all and you popped the compressor hose on. Because this is sticking out a lot. I just generally don't like things sticking out. I think that's not a good idea, but for now we're going to let it slide. I guess last step, put the glass on. You'll notice the audio is somewhat different because the batteries in my wireless mics are dying. I think they're at the end of their life. It's only been a couple years, kind of disappointing about that. They're Sennheiser too, so shame on Sennheiser. Should have gotten better than a couple years out of those batteries, or a year and a half, whatever it's been. So there's a piece of plexi that goes on the outside and a piece of glass on the inside. And the protective sheet, you glue it on. So every time you want to change a protective sheet, you pretty much have to take this whole thing apart. They gave you a couple more pieces of protective sheeting and double sticky tape. But boy, what a pain it's going to be to disassemble all these screws, because there are 4, 8, 10, 12 screws and nuts, which will probably get dropped in the media and lost down below through the land of never find again. So that was kind of a crappy design. They should have had peel-off sheets or something like that. But anyways, plastic goes on the outside to protect it and glass on the inside. So I'm just going to assemble this and we'll be right back. The viewing glass is probably the most horrific of all the steps on this whole thing. These screws barely protrude on the other side. They did do something clever where the plastic touches on the end here. It's sort of thick, touches flush with the metal base right here. And there's a big gap shaped like a U, and then it just pushes on the inside. So no matter how much you tighten these, you can't break the glass, which is a nice thought, except that the screws barely protrude through the other side. Tiny little nuts. Of course, I've got monkey arms. Check this out. I can barely reach over to the other side, so it's a 2-person job to replace the glass on this, unless you're as long armed as I am. I'm 6'5" and I have very long arms, and I can barely reach. So not a great design. So when this gets all mucked up, I don't know. It's going to be hard pressed to want to remove it, because it's really going to suck. So just never spray the sandblaster anywhere near this, and it's probably still going to get pitted. I think that's a very common problem. So the unit, not the world's most stable. The tray was obviously put on there to fix that somewhat, because it was really bad before that. They use just thin gauge sheet metal everywhere. It's super thin, and I'm very disappointed at the quality of some of that. I got to put some foam tape back here where the weld's broken. I mean, I could get my TIG torch out, but then I'm going to get rust. It's just no win for this thing. I don't think it's going to last very long, to be honest with you. But it was interesting to try. There is a suction port here, which you probably have to have off. I mean, not a suction port, but a air cleaning port. But you probably have to have this removed while you're using it, because otherwise you're going to pressurize the cavity, and there'll be nowhere for the air to go. So I assume this is where the air exits. Which, if you don't have filters here, even though they've got a cover over this side to keep most of the dust out, you're still going to get some. So you probably should wear a respirator while you use this. N95 or something like the equivalent, because this thing's probably going to output some dust. So next up, we're going to try and get this out and test it out and see how it works. For consistency, I bought the Harbor Freight media. So this is the glass bead media from Harbor Freight. And I know it's really important to keep this stuff dry, and storing it outside is not a great combo. So we'll see how that works in the long run, because if the media gets wet and clumps, that's probably going to be a problem. We'll just have to play it by ear. First thing I discovered is this joint leaks. I didn't put any Teflon tape on it. Apparently I need to, so we're going to take that apart and put it back together. I've loaded some media up. I didn't fill it up. Looks like I actually got a couple pieces of cardboard in there that I'll get out. You don't want anything to clog, so we'll get that out, and we'll be right back. Teflon tape seemed to help for sure. So we've got a piece of aluminum and a piece of steel in here, an unknown variety of steel, and we're just gonna play around and see what happens. I don't know if I can get shots through the window or not. By the way, I added some tape on the inside of the corner. These corners here where there's a dip in the material, just in case this did want to meet up. It compresses very readily, so. Yeah, you can sort of see, I guess. I don't know if I can hold this in place while I do this, but we'll give it a shot. Start with the aluminum. Obviously, if you wanted to keep these threads, you wouldn't leave this exposed. Boy, that's actually embedding the glass media in here. Maybe you need to use slightly lower pressure or farther away. Yeah, because that was actually embedding the glass. I don't know if you can see that or not. I'm holding the camera with my shoulder. Try some steel. I don't know if you can see or not, and I'm talking through a mask, so it's not ideal in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to grab those parts out of there, but seemed like it worked pretty well. It was extremely fast acting, it seemed. I think my first mistake was on the aluminum. I got the gun too close to it, because the one at work you have to. This one, I think it actually embedded the glass into the aluminum, but let's pop it out and see. So when the door opened, this guy popped off. That's a great sign. Nicely done. Boy, that's a really good finish. It does feel like glass is stuck in this side, not in this one though. And this guy's got a nice finish on it. I think I'd like slightly smaller beads, but generally did a really nice job. Overall, so here's my take. There is a bunch of leakage, even though I doubled up on foam in a bunch of spots, all the way around here and here. A little bit of leakage in the corner of the fine mist, all the corners here. And I used the 3M tape on that one, which had glued the top to the bottom, but they pucker. The metal puckers as you tighten it. I didn't put the washers in because they have locking nuts, and the washers would stop the locking nuts from working. Maybe if I put the washers on this side, which they showed to put them all on the other side, then it would have prevented the puckering a little bit. You never know. I think the nut twisting on this really thin material is not great. A little bit of media leaked out around the gasket on the top of this guy, and that's not great because it's already, as I just touched it lightly, it scratched it. Also, the plastic on the inside is statically attracted, so it's you can't, I don't know if you can see it, but it's sticking on the inside of it in a film. And everything else seems to be okay. Not too much leakage out the side. A little bit out of the bottom of the door over here, I think. Here's the sandblasted parts. This was a piece of aluminum I had. Did a very nice job. This was up close and personal, and it did a really nice deep job. And this was back about 6 inches, and it still took all the adhesive that was on this side off, so that's pretty cool. And this is some alloy steel. Did a pretty good job of that too. Looks like I missed a little bit. Just did a quick cursory job. Yeah, you can tell there's some spots I didn't hit quite well enough. But overall, I think it did a pretty decent job, especially if you spend some time. Again, I have very little experience with sandblasters, so you know, this is one of those things where you got to practice makes perfect and learn all the tricks of the trade. When I pulled the parts out, this hose came off. I put it back on, but that's not a good sign either. I'm running only at about 100 psi, and this thing's good to 125, so that's not the most optimistic thing I've run across. Anyways, I've got a little bit of debris in the bottom I should probably clean out. That was in with the media. The media seems clean, so it must have been something that got dropped in here during construction, like rubber or something. However, this hose over here prevents you from lifting this screen up easily, which is a little bit of a gotcha on their part. That's not very good thinking. Might transition this to sticking out the front over here. Oh, but it'll still prevent the hose. Maybe up high in the back or something. It's not great where it's at. So anyways, bottom line, I give this guy 2.5 out of 5 stars. It gets 2.5 because it's really inexpensive and it works. Presumably they all work more or less. I don't know, again, not enough experience to compare. But the build quality is sort of... The construction took over 4 hours to do, which is really time consuming. The gloves look like you have to replace them, you know, every year or two, which may be normal, I don't know. Really thin gauge material. It seems like it's powder coated. It doesn't seem like regular paint. Oh, you know what? Maybe it is regular paint because I'm seeing a lot of orange peel on this. But you know, that I don't know if powder coat does that as well. It's hard to say. If it's powder coated, that's a big thumbs up. If it's just regular paint, it's not going to last very long. So, anyways, that's my take. Hope you find it useful. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you next time.